Episode 9 of Stargirl gave us a look at Brainwave's origin, Henry King Jr.'s lingering conflict with his newfound powers, and whether or not he wants to do the right thing, or even truly knows what that is, an unlikely meeting between Icicle and Courtney, and Pat's desire to be upfront with Barbara and stop lying about he and Courtney's secrets. Hello everyone, I'm DanTheMan, and this episode, like several in the past, proved that a superhero show doesn't need non-stop action or intense fight scenes to make for compelling television. First off, we got Brainwave's origin. In the comics, he developed his abilities on his own, so this was a change for him, but it worked perfectly with the character in the show, and it was interesting to see what Brainwave was before, and how, like Icicle, he proved to believe himself to be the hero of his own story. The heaviest focus on this episode, however, despite the episode being called Brainwave, was actually on Henry King Jr., Brainwave's son. I gotta get this out of the way first. I think they could have handled his arc better. I like characters that are conflicted like this, but when we first met him in the pilot, he was calling Yolanda a slut and taunting her about the pictures we later found out she sent him, and we were seeing him torment people at the drive-in. Since then, he's been hurting because of his dad, which has made him more somber, but I haven't seen much in the way of an explanation for why his sudden change of heart seems to be happening. He just seemed to magically be torn on being a good person or a dillhole because the plot called for it. Maybe I'm missing something. The show has handled most of the characters well, but I don't quite being sad his dad, who treated him horribly, was in a coma for character growth and a journey to being a better person. That being said, Jake Austin Walker does play the role of someone being conflicted between doing the right thing and succumbing to his darker impulses that his dad likely raised him to have very well, even if the reason for it is somewhat muddy. And the scene with Yolanda confronting him was a highlight of the episode, as both he and Yvette Monreal played their roles perfectly. That was the one time that I could see some logic behind his conflict, as seeing and reading Yolanda's mind showed him the true extent he hurt her in a way that he likely had not realized before. I just think it should have happened sooner and not after he was already supposedly conflicted. We also got the scene with Icicle and his civilian identity over at Courtney's house. It did bother me that neither of them recognized each other, not because I have an issue with secret identities and am perfectly capable of suspending disbelief that both of their mostly flimsy disguises could in this show keep their identities secret, but they threw that out the window last episode with Cindy recognizing Courtney. Yes, most superheroes, their costumes would not fool anyone, much less people who spent any amount of time around them out of it. But I don't know why it was decided, especially on TV and movie adaptations, that it is shown that we accept people who can fly and have all manner of superpowers, that the fact the mask would not work like it does in comics in the real world is some line that has to be drawn that we can't suspend. Granted, some audiences love they acknowledge that, but I'm not really one of them. And the problem is, once you decide to go that route like they did last episode, it now makes Courtney and Icicle both look stupid in this episode, since we acknowledge the disguises are flimsy, but now that the plot calls for it, we're going to pretend for a minute that they aren't. We also got a glimpse of the Seven Soldiers of Victory. I love that, and even though they didn't mention him by name, likely because they couldn't, it was a nice touch that Green Arrow and Speedy were in the picture, in their classic costumes no less. For those who don't know, the Seven Soldiers were a superhero team in the comics, like Pat said here, who were less popular than the Justice Society. They consisted of Star-Spangled Kid, S.T.R.I.P.E, the Crimson Avenger, Shining Knight, Vigilante, Green Arrow, and Speedy. The Crimson Avenger's sidekick Wing was featured in many of the stories, but never a regular member, hence the inside joke of there being 8 people in the picture. In the comics, after continuity was changed in Crisis on Infinite Earth, it was retconned that Green Arrow and Speedy were never members, due to the new continuity not making them heroes back in the 40s, and Wing and Vigilante's sidekick Stuff, that was his name by the way, were the 2 members to take Green Arrow and Speedy's place, and that there really were only 7 of them. It was later retconned again in Courtney's own series Stars and Stripe, with Wing's spot being replaced by an Archer character named the Spider, who was a very obscure character from the era. Although Wing was still a tag-along, thus making it 8 of them and confusing things more, so I don't know. Once it became clear the Seven Soldiers would at least be mentioned in the series, I kind of figured they might go with that version for this show, especially since that was the version Johns introduced in Stars and Stripe, because I assumed they'd not be allowed to show Green Arrow to avoid confusion, but it was great that they went with the original canon team. Finally, we get Barbara finding out about Courtney, or she seemingly will next episode because she's seen too much now. I mean, if the staff wasn't floating in the air, maybe Courtney could have made something up, but the cat's kind of out of the bag now. Although I love she didn't scream when the glowing staff was floating in midair, but did scream after it shut off and fell to the ground because apparently then it was weird. Barbara did find out Courtney and Pat's secrets in the comics, so I can't really fault them for this, but I wish they kept her in the dark longer. One of the most interesting aspects I find about superheroes are their secret identities and them trying to balance a double life, which becomes less of an issue once everyone in their immediate life knows who they are. But Berlanti especially generally can't wait for everyone to find out who a superhero really is, and in most of his shows, the entire supporting cast knows by the end of the first season. Again, I get in the real world you couldn't keep that kind of thing up indefinitely from your own family for years like they do in the comics, even if you actually did have a disguise they wouldn't recognize you in. And even comics go away from that more and more now. But like the mask thing, I just don't know why we've arbitrarily decided these days that that's where suspension of disbelief ends. It also, like in the comics, bothered me with Barbara because I don't think a mother and wife would ever be on board with her husband, and especially her daughter, doing something like that. But she'll have to come around or else the show would be over. So with all that being said, I really did enjoy this episode, even though I was hard on a few aspects of it. The secret origin of Brainwave was well done. The scene of Courtney's family hosting Icicle and his family was also fun to watch. And the Henry storyline, while it took a weird road getting there, if you could go with it, led to some great performances. I definitely can't wait for next episode to see how Barbara reacts and which side Henry falls on. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. I'm Dan the Man, and I'll see you next time.